Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Becky. This is brea.makes.art, and today I wanted to do something that didn't require a lot of thinking, it didn't require a lot of effort, and was colorful and just kind of fun. I wanted to just kind of break out some of my alcohol markers and make something pretty in my sketchbook. So let's go ahead and get right to it. So there's a couple of reasons I decided to do this particular thing in my sketchbook. Number one, I was just flipping through Pinterest trying to get some ideas for what I wanted to do in the sketchbook, and I saw something very similar to this on Pinterest and I thought it was really pretty, and it looked like it was relatively easy to do and was nice and colorful. And as I was sitting down here, I had looked over and saw my alcohol markers and realized I hadn't really played with them very much lately, and that sounded like fun. The other reason was I am still struggling a bit with getting my hands and my brain to coordinate with one another. I've been working a lot on studies, just trying to improve other skills and things like that. But I have tried to draw things from reference a couple of times, and they're just not coming out the way I actually want them to. So I wasn't really feeling like I wanted to do anything that was drawing from reference or anything like that, because I was afraid that the quality was not going to be what I wanted it to be. And I'm not sure if I would consider this an art block, but it's definitely some kind of weird little block that I am in right now, where just things aren't quite working the way I want them to, and it's really frustrating. And part of me is thinking that if I focus a little bit less on it, maybe it'll just go away. So doing something like this was a nice way to focus on something else, but also get some pages done in my sketchbook and have something pretty to look back on as I flip through my sketchbook. As you can see, I started off by just putting kind of a thicker black border around the edges just because I thought that would look nice. And then I just did some crisscross wavy patterns all across the page. Didn't really pay much attention to spacing. I tried to space them relatively evenly, and at first I was putting all of the wavy lines so they were relatively parallel to one another, and then I decided no, they don't have to be, so then I was just kind of wiggling them all over every which way just to kind of make it a little bit more interesting. And then once I had all of those shapes on there, it's time to go in and fill in each of those shapes. And all that I'm doing is just putting curving lines that are connecting two of the corners of each shape together. And when I looked at the example that I was following, there weren't any instructions or anything like that. And I didn't notice any rhyme or reason to which corners they connected. So I just decided to do whichever corners I felt like. And so there wasn't like one line was going in one direction and another line was going in another direction. But it turns out that when I looked back at it, that's actually what they had done. They had basically kind of taken lines across and said, okay, everything on this line is going up and down. Everything on that line is going back and forth. Overall, it doesn't really make that big of a difference. I like mine. I liked theirs. It didn't feel like I had done anything wrong with this one. So if you want to do something like this, you can just pick whichever way you want to do it. Another thing that you could do if you wanted to vary this a little bit is you could fill in each of those shapes with any kind of pattern that you want. It doesn't have to be lines like this. It could be flower shapes or petals or whatever you want, little bubbles, that sort of thing. Anything that you really want to fill it in with, you can, and I think it'll look kind of cool. One nice thing about doing something like this is you don't really have to think too much about what you're doing. There's not a lot of kind of that like looking back and forth between your reference and really kind of thinking about shapes and light and everything like that. It is really just you're putting lines on the paper and connecting two corners. So it was very meditative to do because I didn't really have to think too much about it. It was just, okay, here's the next shape, fill that one in. Here's the next shape, fill that one in. It did take a lot longer to do than I had originally anticipated. I thought that I could be basically completely done with all of the drawing and coloring it in half an hour tops. It ended up taking me closer to an hour to do the whole shebang, and the majority of that was drawing all the little lines and all of these shapes. This is on an 8x8 piece of paper. Obviously, if you did a larger piece of paper, it would probably take you longer. Smaller piece of paper, it would take you less time. One thing that you could do to speed it up if you wanted to do something like this is you could do fewer lines in each of the shapes and kind of space them out a little bit more. I was really packing them in there a lot more than I really needed to. I like how it looks overall, so I'm not mad that I had done that. But if I had wanted to speed it up, I could have definitely put more space in between each line. With these awkward shapes, it was a little bit difficult to put in some of the curved lines because they definitely kind of butted up against the edges of the shape, which ended up thickening up the borders between each of the shapes, which I think overall was a good thing. And I actually do go back in and thicken up the borders even more so because I like that darkness in between each of the shapes. It just kind of adds a lot more to the visual interest of it. One thing that I did notice I was doing as I continued to work on this is I was getting a little bit sloppy in places, and some of my lines kind of seeped out and off into next door shapes, which overall ended up not being a big deal because I was able to thicken up some of the borders and hide some of that. And also because it's so busy, it's hard to see if something like that happens anyway. So if you are doing something like this and some of your lines end up going outside of your original shape, don't worry about it. It's probably not going to be terribly noticeable, especially with so many shapes and so many lines. You're probably not going to see where one kind of went off and went astray. Actually, if you watch for just another couple of seconds here, you are going to see where I end up going outside the lines just a little bit as I'm kind of coming down right there. I just kind of came outside of the line just a little bit, but in the end, you're really not going to notice it because there are just so many lines on there that it's not going to be that big of a deal. I'm trying out some different things, trying to get you guys some different angles of what I'm doing just because I'm drawing a lot of lines here. I thought it would be a little bit boring to watch from the same angle. Let me know if you like this, if you like it when I kind of switch things up, or if you'd rather just have a more consistent top-down view, or if there are other types of things that you would like to see in my videos. Let me know. I would be interested to hear. I want to try and make my videos a little bit more interesting and try and get a little bit more B-roll. I'm really bad about remembering that, so yeah, let me know what you think. Alright, we've skipped ahead here quite a bit because honestly, drawing all these lines was getting boring even for me. So we are just about done here. I've got a few more lines to finish up, and then I'm going to go back through and just kind of thicken up some spots and really kind of fill in some of the corners where all of the things meet, because I think that really added a lot of interest to this whole thing. It ends up adding a lot of depth to it because going in and filling in those corners and basically kind of filling in some of the little triangles that are left over in the corners of each of the pieces makes it look like each of those shapes are kind of bending down into space. And yeah, it just makes it look so much cleaner and deeper and cooler. So if you're going to do something like this, definitely go back in and add some more darkness all around the edges, especially in the corners, and don't feel bad about just filling in some of those little corner triangles because, like I said, it really did add quite a bit to this. So now for the best part, let's color it in. I've picked out about 4 or 5 different color Ohuhu markers. These are all in the purples, and I went from kind of a lighter purple up to a darker kind of reddish purple, and I'm just going to basically do lines of color going from the lightest to the darkest and then back to the lightest again. So it's going to go light, darker, 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 darkest, light, darker, 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 darkest, all the way across. And as you can see, like each of the shapes is connecting on a corner. And so I'm just going to keep doing lines and lines like this over and over. Yeah, these two colors, you can see the difference here, but when I looked at it in person a little bit ago, I wasn't really seeing a big difference, but there's definitely a fairly noticeable difference here. This one is much kind of pinker, more red, where the other one is leaning more blue. And honestly, you could do any colors that you wanted here. I just happen to really like purples, so that's why I picked these colors out. I do think that if I were to do this again, I would pick maybe one less color and make kind of bigger jumps in between the shades so that it's more obvious that they are different, because these three shades in particular do end up looking pretty similar on the page. You can see the difference here, that it is definitely getting a little bit redder, but with all of them kind of next to one another, they end up blending in kind of together a little bit more than I would have liked. So yeah, definitely if you're going to do this, I would limit yourself to maybe 4 colors and do larger jumps in color in between, or jumps in kind of darkness or in between each one, just to kind of make it look a little bit more interesting. Because this right here, that jump there, that contrast there is really nice. I really like that. And then in a minute, I'm going to put the lighter one down again, and you'll really see how that looks really nice with that kind of darker shade next to the lighter shade. It really pops out. And so I think if I had maybe left out kind of the second shade, it would have looked a lot better. But overall, I think it's pretty cool. I like it. And I have done things like this before where I didn't color it in at all, but I think the color is really adding something. It's making me think quilt. It definitely kind of has a soft and pillowy feel to it, and that's kind of fun. And like I said, I really love these colors. I do think it's fun and important to have just kind of something fun and colorful in your sketchbook sometimes, because it's nice to just be flipping through your sketchbook and see something really fun and colorful next to all of the sketches. It's just gives your sketchbook a lot more interest and makes it just a more fun place to be. While this isn't like a go-to type of activity for me in my sketchbook, I have done things like this before in my sketchbook, and I think I might do this particular thing again in maybe different shapes or something like that. I'm just curious if you guys have go-to things that you guys do in your sketchbooks that you love to just kind of put in there, little things that maybe require a little bit less brain work, a little bit less kind of observational things, just to kind of get your hand moving and get something fun and relaxing or whatever in your sketchbook. I would love to hear them, because I'm always looking for something that is a little bit more fun, a little bit looser to do, because sometimes you just kind of need something different. You get a little bit bored or a little bit burned out of doing drawing from reference, or drawing the same old things over and over again. So doing stuff like this is always nice, kind of change of pace. So yeah, let me know if you've got stuff like that, or if there are other things that you would like to see me do in my sketchbook. Anyway, we're just about done coloring here. I hope you guys are enjoying this. If so, I would love to get a like, a subscribe, give me some comments. Any of those things really help more than you would realize. All of that stuff really kind of makes the algorithm kind of perk up its ears and push my content to more people. And the more people that see it, the more likely I am to find people that like my stuff, and the more likely I am to continue to grow this channel. So anything that you could do to help me out would be greatly appreciated. I thank you in advance. So please, again, think about subscribing, hit that like button, leave a comment, do all the things. I would appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so here is the final result. I'm really happy with this. I think it looks pretty cool. It took a lot longer to do than I thought it would, to be honest. All of those little lines in there, it just took a lot of time. They were pretty tedious to do. Coloring it in was easy peasy, but making all of the lines took a long time. I definitely kind of messed up a few times here and there where I kind of like went outside where I needed to go, but it's not that big of a deal because I did kind of thicken up all the borders in between the shapes, so it hid a lot of that. If you look real close, you'll be able to find some spots where I kind of messed up my line and went out where I was supposed to. But overall, I really like how this looks. It's kind of going to be something just kind of pretty to look at in my sketchbook, which I love doing. Just having some kind of pretty colorful something in the sketchbook just makes me happy when I'm flipping through it. So I'm really happy that I took the time to do this, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching it, and I will see you again next week. Bye.